Back west, you don't see too many of these. Lakes, I mean. Natural or man-made. Any kind, really. We neglected the dams or pumped all the water out a long time ago. Owens, Isabella, the San Luis. Drained the aquifers of everything they had. Just a lot of mud and dust now. It's a different feeling watching the sun come up over the water. Takes some getting used to. But if you're here long enough, it starts to seem normal. That's what a ranger's life is now, looking east. You must be the courier folks have been talking about. Word on the radio is that someone wronged you back in Good Springs. The Mojave has a way of burning decent people up, but it sounds like you've done right by the NCR. It's appreciated. Now what can I do for you? I could tell you a lot if you had the time, but at my age, I'm not sure which of us would get tired first. What do you want to know? Suppose it depends on what you think's good. Most folks want to hear about Hoover Dam and Boulder City, but it's a long story. If you want some tall tales about hunting down slavers or busting up gangs, talk to one of the younger rangers. It's kind of a long one, but all right. About 25 years ago, a group of NCR settlers pushed way south into Baja. I guess it doesn't seem so far now if you look at a map, but back then they were out of ways. They built this little shanty town around a well in the middle of nowhere. Called it Rattletail. Word got back to one of our stations that raiders had been attacking the place. I went out with 6 rangers. We must have been on the trail for a week before we got to Rattletail. We lost one woman to night stalkers and another almost died of dehydration. When we reached the place, it's 6 shacks set up around an old well. There's over 24 bodies lying in the dunes way outside of town, and 5 men with .308 rifles crouched behind sandbags. And these bodies, these people out in the sand, they aren't raiders, aren't even heavily armed. They're just people who were trying to get to the only well in 50 miles. I didn't have to talk to the men to see that they did not care one bit. They had planted an NCR flag over the well. They would not budge until every last one of them was laid out dead and cold. So I walked up and told them there was a group of raiders coming, 100 strong. I made up some cockamamie name for them and everything. The men looked at each other, looked at us, and asked me what we were going to do about it. I told them we would take them back into NCR territory because we'd already lost 10 Rangers on the way out. 10 Rangers, 5 men with .308 rifles. Well, that was enough for them. They packed up what they could, and we took them back north. Last I heard, they settled somewhere in Anza Borrego. Raised bighorners. Had some tough times, but it worked out okay for them. So there you go. That's my one bit of good. In big battles, Caesar deploys his legionaries in waves. Recruits up front, prime soldiers behind the recruits, old guard bringing up the rear. Opponents wear themselves out dealing with the first 2 waves, if they survive that long. When the veterans step up, there's not much fight left. Caesar can adapt, though, and when required, he can run any mix of legionaries as skirmishers and still retain order in the ranks. Joshua Graham, Caesar's old legate, he wasn't so flexible. When the Legion attacked Hoover Dam, General Oliver ordered his troopers back to the middle ground just after first contact. Graham pushed all of the legionaries onto the dam, filling the east side with recruits up front and veterans in the back, by the book. But once they were in, they were stuck there. Oliver's troopers were entrenched and wouldn't give a foot. That's when we ordered the Rangers and the 1st Recon sharpshooters to start picking off veteran Legion officers from a high ridge west of the dam. That only lasted about a minute before Graham ordered the back ranks to push through to the front and rush the ridge. Caused total chaos among the younger legionaries. Oliver's troopers fell back to the side walkways and stayed out of the veterans' way. By the time the veterans got to the ridge, we were already in Boulder City. They followed us down there, but we were out before they realized what was happening. We'd packed the old city with C4 and dynamite. Crude, but it did the job. Those who didn't die in the blast were in no position to mount a defense. The ones left on the dam didn't know what to do. The troopers routed them. Graham pulled the remaining legionaries back, but the battle was over. He went south, back to the Grand Canyon, back to Caesar. And that was the last we saw or heard from Joshua Graham. Shoot. I could tell you a lot if you had the time, but at my age, I'm not sure which of us would get tired first. What do you want to know? Oh, well, I guess it must be coming up on 40 years or so. Back before Elise was chief, anyway. It was a heck of a lot harder then. Weren't as many of us to go around, but I think it was a lot easier to tell the good guys from the bad. Well, there's what we're supposed to be doing and what we're actually doing. There's a big gap between those two things, about as wide as that lake out there. To protect against all forms of tyranny, as simple as that. 30, 40 years ago, the wasteland was full of despots, slavers, raiders, tough-talking hoodlums with gangs who'd like to kick around towns. Back then, the NCR military was still young, couldn't cover much ground. It took groups like ours to tip the balance back to the good guys. Sitting on the shore of Lake Mead, looking east, listening to a radio, trying to not get too many people killed. I'm too old to be slapping leather, but I had hoped for something else. More than this, anyway. There's a lot of answers to that question, but it started with the Ranger Unification Treaty. We weren't always the only show in town. Nevada had its own posse, the Desert Rangers. They fought Caesar even farther east, out in Arizona. Years back, we met with the Desert Rangers at Mojave Outpost and agreed to help them against Caesar if they would join the NCR. Shoot. Folks around here call me the chief, but Hennon's just fine. The Rangers run themselves pretty well, but I try to lend a hand. Mostly administrative work, helping coordinate intel on the radio. That and keeping an eye on the fires growing across the water. It's a simple system when it works. Patrol Rangers radio intel to ranger stations. Comm Rangers send the intel up the station chain until it reaches Camp Golf. Then I or one of the other Rangers on duty organize the data, evaluate it, and send information to camps or troopers in the field. Comm Rangers might have an incomplete picture of the situation. There's a lot going on out there. Intel needs to be coordinated through Gulf so we can verify and advise appropriately. Troopers have enough to deal with. We don't want them questioning their intel. Shoot. Not too long ago, they took Nelson and Searchlight. They got some camps on the eastern shore of the Colorado, and a monstrosity on the hill across the lake, that's for Caesar. Some folks don't believe he's here yet, but you can tell. He's the eye of the storm. It all roils and spins around him. You don't have to see the man to see the effect he has. Nelson was barely set up. We had a big stretch of unprotected land between Forlorn Hope and Searchlight, and Nelson was the solution. A Deaconess named Dead Sea took the place and caused a lot of damage. By the way, I appreciate what you did for the troopers down there. Nelson might not be the most strategically important place, but taking Dead Sea out means a lot to them. Searchlight was worse. One of Caesar's Frumentari must have found something in there, flooded the whole camp with radiation. Shoot. It's no secret we've had better campaigns. Holding this whole length of river isn't easy. We're stretched thin and the long 15 just keeps getting longer. Slow to get supplies, slower to get reinforcements. NCR's Senate has got funds tied up at the boneyard. President Kimball ordered our most experienced rangers to chase ghosts down at Baja. It's complicated. Goes way back. I told President Kimball that we need more rangers here. He accepted that, but took the most experienced ones and sent them south. Patrol rangers are good men and women, but we're about to fight a war. Senate elections are coming up. Local representatives don't want to push any more funding to the Mojave campaign because it's unpopular. Most of the folks around the boneyard haven't been to New Vegas and probably never will. All they know is that their money gets sucked away to this desert and their brothers, sisters, sons, and daughters die here. You've seen it yourself. Some of them don't even have proper service rifles or armor. Our heavy infantry, power armor units, they're back in NCR territory protecting the interests of Brahmin barons against small-time raiders. Brahmin barons only have one vote at the ballot box, but they have a lot of money to throw around. Shoot. The best of the best, and worst of the worst. He came out of NCR, one of the followers of the apocalypse. Like a lot of the followers, he went out in the wilderness with a partner to try to help those who needed helping. Not much different from how the Rangers used to be, except with books and medicine instead of guns. Out to the Grand Canyon. He met a missionary from Utah, a man by the name of Joshua Graham. Graham helped translate for the followers and the tribes. All three of them got nabbed by the Blackfoots down there, back when they were still at war with every other tribe in the Southwest. Somewhere along the way, he realized he needed to educate the Blackfoots or they were going to get wiped out with the rest of the tribe. Showed them how to use guns, how to make explosives. Once he taught the Blackfoots a thing or two, they needed him. And he no longer needed the followers, NCR, or anyone else. He decided he could remake the tribes of the Southwest whether they wanted it or not. He became Caesar, and Joshua Graham became his legate, his right hand. That's where Graham stayed until Hoover Dam. Losing the dam was the worst defeat the Legion ever suffered. Graham had been with Caesar since the beginning, but he had to set an example. The Praetorians covered Graham in pitch, lit him on fire, and down into the Grand Canyon he went. It's not that clear-cut. You have to understand, Graham was the toughest son of a gun anyone around these parts had ever seen. Before Hoover, we had 5 kill reports on Graham from Rangers and 1st Recon sharpshooters who tried to take him out. Some folks think he's still alive. call him the Burned Man. Yes and no. The Blackfoots don't exist anymore. Just like any other tribe that gets swallowed by the Legion. Caesar takes the tribal out of the tribe. Scrapes and burns off tattoos, breaks up families, forces mixed breeding so all the old loyalties die away. The only tribe in the Legion is the Legion. Caesar is their chief, father, and god, all rolled into one. Shoot. Adios.